Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Thursday, June 10th, 2021, and I made a video yesterday talking about the Virginia governor's race, and today we actually get our first ever 2021 Virginia governor poll between Glenn Youngkin and Terry McAuliffe, the Republican and Democratic nominees respectively. So it's going to be quite interesting. Looking at the results here, it shows a 2-point lead for Terry McAuliffe. But before we get into it, I want to talk about who this pollster is and what they represent and why this 2-point lead might not actually be a 2-point lead, but potentially something a little bit higher. Let's take a look. Well, if you go on the official website for WPA Intelligence, I guess it's WPA Intelligence, they are a conservative polling company. They do a lot of data analysis. They pretty much try to gauge the individual races in certain congressional districts and statewide races as well. And looking at their own Twitter page, I mean, they're very open about being conservative. It says conservative research, data science, and tech firm with unmatched accuracy. Experts in public opinion, analytics, behavioral science, polling, and donor research. So they are pretty out there in terms of how open they are about their methodology or their partisan lean. And looking at their pollster rating from FiveThirtyEight, let's see if we can actually find it here. Let's just type in WPA. We'll see that it has a BC grade, which means that, sometimes it does find itself to be pretty accurate and sometimes not. Only 68% of the time is WPA Intelligence actually correct about the outcome of the race. That's why they have a BC rated polling from FiveThirtyEight. Now, we can actually take a closer look at some of the more recent ones or some of the more drawn-out polls that they have released. We've also seen that in the House District in Texas 21st District, we see that they predicted the Republican victory. In Nevada, they got it spot on with a 2-point victory for Joe Biden. A lot of these races that they predicted, some of them were accurate in terms of the winner, but not necessarily in the margin. But I do think that they should be applauded on the fact that they did get the winner right in many of these races. However, I do want to say that sometimes they were off. If you're looking at some of these results here, I mean, you'll see that in May of 2019, I get it, it was a year and a half out, or a year and a little bit out, but they still could have gotten things a little bit closer to the mark. I mean, you're looking at them predicting Donald Trump winning Wisconsin, which didn't happen. Donald Trump in a position where some of these were right, and then some of these weren't. He won Iowa by more than that. Again, margins matter. They got the eventual winner correct in the majority of these races, so I'm not going to say that it's inaccurate. But as FiveThirtyEight does point out, they are only 68% accurate, and I'm not entirely sure how they get that exact result. I mean, they predicted that John Tester was going to lose. They predicted that Josh Hawley, however, was going to win, that Marsha Blackburn was going to win. So sometimes they're right, and sometimes they're wrong. I just wanted to make that a point because I did find it to be quite interesting, looking at the results. And sometimes they overestimate Republicans. For the example of Ted Cruz, he didn't win by 9. He won by 3. And then other times, they underestimate Republicans as well. So it is a little tricky to gauge the validity of this pollster, but I'm not going to deny a polling firm from any type of credibility simply because it has a partisan lean. Because no one really benefits when you lie to your own people, when you lie to the people that are funding this poll or your own political party. You never want to be wrong about something like that, but you can certainly tell through the form of methodology or the way that they ask the question that there is some type of inherent bias that might skew the results in favor of one candidate or another. So that's why I'm pointing out that it is a Republican internal type poll. You're talking about a conservative pollster here. So if this is a poll that's being taken by the right wing, I can only imagine what a poll might look like amongst a regular news source. I'm not saying they're wrong about who's leading or they're wrong about the margin, but I do think that the numbers will look different when you're looking at another race. But McAuliffe leading by 2 points in a Republican internal, I think is honestly a good sign for the Democratic Party. I mean, you're talking about an election that has a few months until it actually occurs. You have July, August, September, October. So 4 months, and then we're straight into the election season. We'll be on election night on the 2nd day of November. And that will be when we will actually see whether or not Virginia Democrats turn out in the same way they did back in 2017 when Ralph Northam defeated Ed Gillespie by a 9-point margin of victory. These polling numbers are sort of reminding me a lot of what happened back in 2013 with Terry McAuliffe's narrow victory, just a victory of 2.5%. across the state, nothing large, and the polling data indicated that McAuliffe was going to have a larger margin. I think that because 2013 and 2014 were very much good years for the Republican Party, that it simply, was just Republicans outperforming what they were expected to do the same way they did a year later. All in all, though, I will say that Terry McAuliffe was still able to hold out in what was supposed to be an opposition year and was still able to win this governor's race despite it being previously held by a Republican. I kid you not, there was a Republican governor from 2009 to 2013 because that Republican won by over 15 points back in 2009, a year after Obama flipped the state for the first time in a very long time, in decades at that. So for Terry McAuliffe to be back on this stage, back in the position where he could win the governor's office, he didn't necessarily have a competitive primary, and he probably won't have a super competitive general election season either, as it stands currently. I get it. It's a 2-point lead, but I'm not really buying that Terry McAuliffe is going to win by just 2 points. I think it could be closer than the Ralph Northam race if things go well for the GOP. But Virginia has gone so far towards the left that it's really hard for me to draw that conclusion. And for an own Republican internal to put McAuliffe up, that's when I start to question how realistic does the GOP have of a chance at victory here. I think they certainly have one, but the chances do dwindle as more and more data and more results between the primary and the convention and endorsements and campaigning and canvassing efforts and fundraising. A lot of things are starting to peel away the GOP's previously larger chance at victory. But of course, the times can change, the elections can change just like that. American politics happens overnight. So it is very possible Glenn Youngkin could make a last-minute resurgence in October and end up winning. But to start off at this point, being down 2 points in a Republican internal, what doesn't necessarily strike me as the best opportunity for the GOP. And like I mentioned about the state of Virginia, I want you to keep a look on it. Keep your eye out for Virginia as I go through the years. We're going to do a flashback to the 2000 presidential election. The 2000 race, the beginning of the 21st century. We could go back to Bill Clinton, George H.W. Bush, Ronald Reagan. I don't want to. I want to focus on the 21st century because this is when really modern or traditional politics as we know it began. And Virginia started off that wave with an 8-point victory for George W. Bush over Al Gore. Fast forward to 2004, you notice Virginia is an 8.2% margin of victory. Between 2000 and 2004, the GOP actually gained votes in the state of Virginia, improved off the 2000 margin. But then 2008 rolls around. You're taking a state won by 8 percentage points. How could you compare that to another state? I mean, you're looking at Missouri, also won by 8 points. Arkansas, nearly an 8-point margin of victory. Some of these states were won by the same amount as Virginia. And then you're looking at 2008. And all of a sudden, Obama obliterates John McCain on the electoral map. And Virginia goes from being an 8-point margin of victory state for the GOP all the way to a 6-point victory for Obama. A 14-point swing across the entire state, and mainly across Northern Virginia. But fast forward to 2012, it narrows up. Virginia goes to Obama by just 3.9%. But that's still a victory. And then 2016 rolls around, and Virginia gets to a 5.3% margin of victory for Hillary Clinton. Well, then 2020 rolls around, and Joe Biden wins the state of Virginia by 10.1%. He outperformed Clinton, who had her running mate as a senator from Virginia. That senator went to win re-election in 2018 by over 15 points. You had a popular senator on your ticket, and Joe Biden did better than that. In 2012, Obama won more electoral votes than Biden. Biden did better in Virginia. 2008, Obama swung the state 14 points to the left. Biden did better than that. Looking at the election results, Biden did better than every Democrat in Virginia, dating all the way back to 1944. 1944. Half a century and decades passed. And Biden did better than all of those Democrats. So this puts the GOP in a tricky position, which sort of explains why they might not necessarily be leading in their own WPA intelligence poll. When you have a Republican or conservative pollster and they still can't find a way to put your party ahead, it's not a good sign. It's never a good sign. They don't benefit by lying, but if you look at the Trafalgar Group polls or other pollsters that are next to the name or are conservative pollsters, you will see many of the times they are off the mark margin-wise by a lot. Not to say regular pollsters aren't, because as the 2020 election showed, they absolutely are. But I am going to say that in some of these more interesting elections, some of these special elections or off-year elections, these Republican pollsters typically don't get it 100% accurate. They typically don't get it nearly 100% accurate. And looking at the pollster ratings simply for WPA intelligence, a 68% victory, a 68% races called correctly rating doesn't necessarily strike me as a pollster that I should be taking as, the final and done deal. I do think that it should be added in. I think it should certainly be averaged out. I think it should be covered, as I'm doing currently. I'm not going to discredit it because they get races wrong a third of the time. Many other pollsters do. But I'm not going to say this is the end-all be-all, and all of a sudden, because the first poll indicates a 2-point margin victory for Terry McAuliffe, that that's what the result will be. No, I really do think that looking at the election results of 2020, 2017, 2016, even 2018, looking at the election results, 2013, the last time Terry McAuliffe was on the ballot, I can't find a way to try to say that the Democrats don't have the advantage in the state of Virginia. I can't try to find a single race between Obama's second term and Joe Biden now in which the Republican Party made significant advancements on the Democratic Party enough to win a statewide race. The only thing I've seen so far is the fact that in 2014, we saw an exceptionally close Senate race in which Ed Gillespie, the 2017 Republican nominee, nearly became a senator from the state of Virginia. But other than that, it was still a loss. It's still a loss. It's still something that the GOP wasn't able to win. But other than that, can't even find anything within the realm of possibility to argue that the GOP is making improvements in Virginia, that they are, a powerful force in the state of Virginia, because they went from being in the supermajority in the state legislature all the way down to being in the minority 2 years later. It was just such a significant shift in power in the state of Virginia. And COVID wasn't necessarily even considered as a possibility or a major issue when you were looking at the election results in 2019 and 2017. So can you imagine what the energy would have been like on the Democratic side had it been a situation in which President Trump was in office and COVID-19 was a very large threat? You saw it happen on the presidential level where Biden won by 10.1%. Can you imagine what that would have done to some of these more interesting statewide races, such as the governor's race or the state, delegate race for the House of Delegates or the state Senate races? I think the GOP might have been even, defeated by an even larger margin had that been the situation. So besides that, WPA intelligence is telling us that Terry McAuliffe also has a 40% approval rating. Besides the head-to-head matchup, I don't necessarily buy this as well. For 13% of the state to have never heard of their own governor for 4 years, I don't know. I understand some people really don't pay attention to politics, but I'm thinking that 13% number is a little bit smaller. And for Terry McAuliffe to be in a position where he's at a 40% approval rating, I'm sure if the rest of the public knew who he was, that approval rating would rise. Democrats are popular in the state of Virginia. Democrats are the majority in the state of Virginia. Democrats have the advantage in the state of Virginia, which is why it's difficult for Glenn Youngkin to win. But if 2021, over the next few months, ends up being a year in which Joe Biden becomes unpopular, the same way Barack Obama did leading into 2010, things can change. American politics loves to be changing left and right, completely upside down in the matter of hours, minutes sometimes. But for Terry McAuliffe to be in a position where he's only approved of by 2 points, I really don't buy that either. The public image on a former governor who won in a red year, honestly speaking, I don't understand how you could say he's favored, in terms of the public view by just 2 points. I get it. Maybe 13, maybe 10, 7% of the public hasn't heard of him, but I'm sure that this number is higher, and we will see it rise when we look at some of the other data that will be released. But this is the first poll that we've seen. They've broken it down as well into independents and then different regions of the state. You'll see that independents actually favor Glenn Youngkin is something that they wanted to point out as well. You can sort of see here in the statement that they made that it does sort of lean towards the right. It says, despite having been a candidate for only 20 weeks, recent survey results have shown Glenn Youngkin within the margin of error in the upcoming election against Terry McAuliffe by just 2 points. Looking at some of these points they're making, Glenn Youngkin leads a point among voters who don't identify as Republican or Democrat. Youngkin leads in every major media market, but for Washington, D.C., it seems as if they're really trying to highlight the electability and the chance of victory that Glenn Youngkin has in this poll. But I don't necessarily buy that independents are leading towards the Republican Party. Maybe they are more outspoken about it, considering 13% are undecided, but I can certainly expect, and I wholeheartedly expect, many of these independent voters to transition or vote for the Democratic Party when it comes down to the eventual ballot. If you look at the Virginia polling results in 2017, looking at the results, you saw Ralph Northam up by 3.3%. I kid you not. 3.3%. He won by 9 percentage points. Some people in Virginia might actually be withholding their eventual vote for the Democratic Party until the ballot box and just not revealing it to the pollster. And, I don't think 2017 is going to be identical, or 2021 is going to be identical to 2017, but I certainly think the Democratic Party will perform better than a 2-point margin victory as it stands currently. Like I said, Terry McAuliffe did not have a competitive primary. Glenn Youngkin went through a very weird type of primary. I think that this race can be competitive. I think Glenn Youngkin can win, but is he the favorite now? Absolutely not. Is a 2-point victory favored now? Absolutely not. We are going to see probably a lot more data get released, and then it's going to be worth compiling it and averaging it then. But since this is our first poll and it is a Republican internal, I did think it was quite interesting covering, especially since Terry McAuliffe was leading in a right-leaning pollster. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2021 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.